Chloe wiped her hands on the stiff apron tied around her waist, the faint smell of coffee and grease clinging to her skin. The diner was alive with the clatter of plates and the low hum of conversations, but her focus was on the couple at table 7. The man, Michael, leaned back in his booth, his tailored suit catching the dim light, a smirk playing on his lips as his girlfriend, Sophia, waved a manicured hand in Chloe's direction. "Excuse me, waitress," Sophia called, her voice sharp enough to cut through the din. "This latte is basically dishwater. Can you, try again?" Chloe's jaw tightened, but she forced a smile, nodding as she took the cup. The other servers shot her sympathetic glances from behind the counter, but no one stepped in. This was her table, her problem. She turned toward the coffee station, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor, when Sophia's voice rang out again. "Oh, and maybe hurry? We don't have all day." Michael chuckled, his eyes scanning Chloe like she was part of the menu. "Babe, relax," he said, but his tone egged Sophia on. "No, seriously, Michael, does she even understand English? Or is she just slow?" Chloe's fingers gripped the cup tighter, her cheeks burning, but she kept moving. She'd heard worse. The diner wasn't exactly a haven of kindness, especially not for a 29-year-old single mom working double shifts to keep the lights on at home. She set the cup down and started remaking the lie, her hands steady despite the sting of their words. Across the room, at a corner table half hidden by a fake fern, David sat nursing a black coffee, his laptop open but forgotten. He was in his late 40s, dressed in a plain button-down, the kind of guy who blended into the woodwork. His eyes flicked toward Chloe, catching the way her shoulders stiffened as Sophia's voice carried. He'd been coming to the diner for weeks, always quiet, always watching. Not in a creepy way, just observant, like he was piecing together a puzzle. He noticed how Chloe moved, quick and efficient, how she smiled at rude customers even when her eyes didn't. He'd overheard her once, weeks ago, calming a stressed coworker in a language he couldn't place, her voice soft but firm, like she was born to it. Now, as Sophia's taunts grew louder, David's pen tapped against his notebook, his jaw tight. Chloe returned to table 7, setting the fresh latte down with a practiced calm. "Here you go. Anything else I can get you?" she asked, her voice steady, though her pulse hammered. Sophia took a sip, her lips pursing like she'd tasted lemon. "Better, I guess," she said, then leaned toward Michael, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Bet she can't even spell the right." Michael grinned, leaning forward. "Hey, sweetheart, can you spell it? LAD? Or is that too much for you?" Chloe's smile didn't falter, but her eyes flicked to the side, calculating. She could snap back, God, she wanted to, but losing this job wasn't an option. Not with her daughter's school fees due next week. "I think I've got it," she said, her tone light, deflecting. She turned to clear another table, but Sophia wasn't done. "Oh, come on, don't be shy. Say something smart for once." David's pen stopped moving. He glanced up, his gaze narrowing as Sophia's words hung in the air. Chloe was already moving away, stacking plates, but he could see the tension in her hands, the way her fingers curled a little too tightly around the dishes. He'd seen her handle worse customers with grace, but this was different, personal, cruel. He scribbled something in his notebook, then looked back at Chloe, who was now wiping down a table, her movements quick, almost mechanical. She didn't see him watching, didn't know he'd been listening to her for weeks, catching fragments of her life. The way she'd hum to herself when the diner was quiet, the way she'd slip a free juice to a kid whose mom looked stretched thin. And that language, she'd used it again yesterday, helping a lost tourist with directions, her words fluid, confident, nothing like the timid waitress Sophia saw. At table 7, Michael was scrolling his phone, bored now that Chloe had walked away. Sophia, though, wasn't letting it go. "I bet she's got no education," she said, loud enough for Chloe to hear across the room. "Probably barely made it through high school." Chloe's hand paused on the rag she was using, her breath catching. She wanted to turn around, to say something that would wipe that smug look off Sophia's face, but she bit her tongue. She had to. Her daughter's face flashed in her mind, those big eyes, that gap-toothed smile. Chloe exhaled and kept wiping, her movements deliberate, like she could scrub away the humiliation. David's coffee had gone cold. He leaned back, his eyes flicking between Chloe and the couple. He'd been in enough boardrooms to recognize Michael's type: money, power, and a need to flex both. Sophia was just the garnish, her cruelty a performance for his amusement. But Chloe? She was something else. David had heard her switch languages twice now, once with a tourist, once with a delivery guy who'd been struggling with an order. Both times, she'd been seamless, her words flowing like she'd lived a dozen lives. He didn't know what it was yet, but he knew it was rare. His company was bleeding talent, stuck in a rut with international clients they couldn't communicate with. And here was this waitress, juggling plates and insults, with a gift she didn't even flaunt. Chloe was back at the counter now, refilling a coffee pot, when another customer waved her over, a regular, an older guy who always tipped $1 no matter the bill. "Chloe, you okay?" he asked quietly as she topped off his mug. She smiled, genuine this time, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Hanging in there, Joe," she said, her voice soft. "Just another day." Joe nodded, but his gaze lingered, like he could see the weight she was carrying. She moved on to the next table, her apron pocket jingling with loose change, her mind already on the next task. But Sophia's voice cut through again, this time louder, sharper. "Hey, waitress, you ever think about, learning something? Maybe a language or two. Might help you get a real job." Chloe froze, her hand on a ketchup bottle. The diner seemed to quiet for a split second, all eyes on her. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, the urge to spin around and let loose. She knew languages, 5, to be exact, picked up from years of late-night studying, from books borrowed from the library, from conversations with her grandparents before they passed. She could have shut Sophia down in French, Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic, or Italian, but what would that prove? They'd just laugh harder. Instead, she set the bottle down, her fingers trembling slightly, and turned back to the counter. "Ignore them," her coworker Lisa whispered, passing by with a tray. "They're just rich and miserable." Chloe nodded, but the words still stung, like salt in a cut. David was writing again, his pen moving faster now. He'd heard enough. Michael and Sophia were still chuckling, their voices grating, but his focus was on Chloe. She was back at work, pouring coffee, clearing plates, her face a mask of calm. But he saw the cracks, the way her lips pressed together, the way her eyes darted toward the clock, like she was counting the minutes until her shift ended. He flipped a page in his notebook, jotting down a name, a number, and a plan. He didn't know Chloe's story, not fully, but he knew talent when he saw it. And he knew opportunity when it knocked. At table 7, Sophia was leaning into Michael, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm telling you, she's got nothing going for her. Look at her, stuck here, probably forever." Michael laughed, but his eyes were back on his phone, already losing interest. Chloe, wiping down the counter now, caught the tail end of their words. Her hands slowed, just for a moment, before she forced herself to keep moving. She didn't look at them, didn't give them the satisfaction. But David was still watching, his pen hovering over the page, his mind turning. "Chloe," he said under his breath, testing the name, like it was the start of something. Then he looked up, catching her eye for the first time. She didn't notice, not yet, but he smiled faintly, like he knew something she didn't. "So," he said softly, to no one but himself, "what else can you do?" Chloe didn't hear David's quiet words, her attention pulled back to the counter where the coffee pot hissed, nearly empty again. She glanced at table 7, where Sophia was still leaning into Michael, her laughter sharp like broken glass. "I mean, can you imagine her trying to do anything else?" Sophia said, her voice carrying deliberately. Chloe's fingers tightened around the pot's handle, but she kept her face neutral, pouring the last of the coffee into a customer's mug. She wasn't going to give them the reaction they wanted. Not today. Her shift was almost over, and she could already picture her daughter, Mia, waiting at home, probably drawing pictures on the back of old grocery receipts. That thought kept her moving, kept her from snapping back. At his corner table, David closed his notebook with a soft snap, his eyes still on Chloe. He'd seen enough to know she wasn't just a waitress surviving a tough shift. There was something in the way she carried herself, steady, despite the weight of the day. He'd built his company on spotting potential where others saw none, and Chloe was a puzzle he couldn't ignore. He sipped his cold coffee, grimacing slightly, then waved her over. "Miss?" he called, his voice calm but clear. Chloe glanced up, surprised, and made her way to his table, her apron brushing against her thighs. "Need a refill?" she asked, already reaching for the pot she'd just set down. David shook his head, leaning forward slightly. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something," he said, his tone warm but direct. "I couldn't help overhearing. You handled that table pretty well, all things considered." Chloe's smile was polite but guarded, her eyes scanning his face for the catch. "Just doing my job," she said, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. David nodded, his gaze steady. "Takes more than just a job to stay that calm. I heard you the other day, too, helping that tourist. What language was that?" Chloe blinked, caught off guard. She wasn't used to customers noticing anything beyond their orders. "Oh, that was Mandarin," she said, her voice softening. He was lost, needed directions. David's eyebrows lifted slightly, impressed but not surprised. "Mandarin? That's not exactly common around here. You speak anything else?" Chloe hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of her apron. She didn't like talking about herself, especially not at work, where people like Sophia were quick to pounce on anything that made her stand out. But David's question felt different, like he wasn't just making small talk. "A few," she said carefully. "Spanish, French, some Arabic. Italian too." David leaned back, a small smile tugging at his lips. "That's a hell of a list," he said. "Where'd you pick all that up?" Chloe shrugged, her eyes flicking toward table 7, where Sophia was now scrolling her phone, oblivious. "Books, mostly. My grandparents spoke a couple of them, and I just kept going. Helps pass the time." She didn't mention the sleepless nights studying after Mia went to bed, or the library books she'd memorized cover to cover. David nodded, like he was filing the information away. "Ever think about using it for something more than directions?" he asked. Chloe's smile faltered, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "Like what?" she said, her voice quieter now. Before David could answer, Sophia's voice cut through the diner again. "Hey, waitress, we're ready for the check. If you can manage that." Chloe's shoulders stiffened, but she turned to David with an apologetic nod. "Duty calls," she said, her tone light but strained. She moved to table 7, pulling the check from her apron pocket and setting it down with a practiced smile. "Anything else I can get you?" she asked, her voice steady despite Sophia's eye roll. "Just the change, and make it quick," Sophia said, barely looking up from her phone. Michael slid a card across the table, his eyes lingering on Chloe a little too long. "You know, you're not bad at this," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Maybe you'll get a better gig someday." Chloe didn't respond, just took the card and headed to the register, her jaw tight. David watched the exchange, his fingers tapping his closed notebook. He'd seen enough of Michael and Sophia to know their type, people who thought money gave them the right to belittle anyone in their path. But Chloe's restraint, her quiet strength, was something else entirely. He opened his notebook again, jotting down a few more lines, his mind racing. His company was expanding into new markets, and they were desperate for people who could bridge language gaps with clients in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Chloe wasn't just a waitress, she was a solution to a problem he'd been wrestling with for months. At the counter, Chloe swiped Michael's card, her movements quick and mechanical. Lisa, her coworker, leaned over, her voice low. "Those two are the worst. You okay?" Chloe nodded, but her eyes were distant. "Yeah, just counting the minutes till I'm out of here." Lisa gave her a sympathetic pat on the shoulder before rushing off to another table. Chloe glanced at the clock. 30 minutes left in her shift. She could make it. She always did. But as she handed the receipt back to Michael, Sophia's voice piped up again, sharper this time. "You know, it's kind of sad," she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Stuck in a place like this, no real skills, no future. Don't you ever get tired of it?" Chloe's hand froze on the receipt, her heart pounding. She could feel every eye in the diner on her, the weight of Sophia's words pressing down like a physical force. She wanted to say something, anything, to shut her up. She could have told them she spoke more languages than they'd ever dream of learning, that she taught herself while raising a daughter alone, that she was more than this apron and these sore feet. But instead, she forced a smile, her voice calm. "I get by," she said, turning away before Sophia could respond. Her hands shook as she cleared a nearby table, the plates clattering softly. David was on his feet now, slipping his notebook into his bag. He couldn't stand it any longer, the way Sophia and Michael treated Chloe like she was invisible, like her worth was tied to their tips. He approached the counter, catching Chloe's eye as she stacked plates. "Hey," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to answer them like that. You're better than they think." Chloe looked up, surprised, her guard still up. "Thanks," she said, her tone cautious. "But I'm fine." "Really?" David shook his head, pulling a business card from his pocket. "I'm serious," he said, sliding the card across the counter. "I run a company that could use someone like you. Call me tomorrow. Let's talk." Chloe stared at the card, her fingers hovering over it. David Carter, CO, Carter Global Solutions. She'd never heard of it, but the weight of the card felt real, like a door she hadn't noticed before. "I don't even know what you do," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. David smiled, not pushy, just confident. "We help companies talk to each other, across borders, languages, cultures. You'd be a natural." Chloe's eyes flicked to his, searching for the catch, but before she could respond, Sophia's voice rang out again from table 7. "Excuse me, can we get some service over here? Or are you too busy chatting?" Chloe's face tightened, but she pocketed the card and turned back to her work, her mind spinning. David didn't push, just nodded and stepped back, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer. He'd planted the seed, now it was up to her. As he headed for the door, Chloe glanced at the card in her apron pocket, her fingers brushing against it. She didn't know what Carter Global Solutions was, or why this quiet stranger thought she belonged there. But for the first time all day, she felt a flicker of something, hope, maybe, or just the chance to be seen. "So," she said to herself, her voice lost in the diner's noise, "what's the worst that could happen?" Chloe's fingers lingered on David's business card in her apron pocket, the edges slightly worn from her touch. The diner's noise pressed in around her, clinking dishes, the low murmur of customers, Sophia's voice still sharp from table 7, demanding another refill. Chloe's shift was down to its final minutes, but Sophia's latest jab felt like it could stretch time itself. "Seriously, are you deaf now too?" Sophia said, her tone dripping with impatience as she waved her empty glass. Michael chuckled, scrolling his phone, barely engaged. Chloe exhaled, forcing her feet to move toward their table, her smile a thin mask. "Coming right up," she said, her voice steady, though her pulse thrummed with the urge to say more. David was gone now, his corner table empty except for a generous tip tucked under his coffee mug. Chloe had glanced at his business card again while grabbing Sophia's refill, the words Carter Global Solutions burning into her mind. She didn't know what it meant, not really, but the weight of his offer sat heavy in her chest. She poured water into Sophia's glass, ignoring the woman's exaggerated sigh. "Finally," Sophia muttered, then leaned toward Michael. "Bet she's dreaming of a big break while she's stuck pouring water for us." Michael smirked, not looking up. "Let her dream. She's not going anywhere." Chloe's hand tightened on the pitcher, but she turned away, her mind racing. She was done letting their words define her. Back at the counter, Chloe slipped into the rhythm of closing out her shift, wiping down surfaces and counting tips. Her coworker Lisa nudged her shoulder, nodding toward table 7. "They're leaving soon, thank God," Lisa whispered. "You held it together like a saint." Chloe gave a small smile, but her thoughts were on David's card. She'd spent years teaching herself languages, not for a job or a title, but because words were her escape, her way of building a world bigger than this diner. Now, someone had noticed. She pulled the card out, staring at the number, her thumb tracing the embossed letters. "You gonna call him?" Lisa asked, catching her look. Chloe hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe." What's there to lose? The next morning, Chloe sat at her kitchen table, Mia coloring beside her, the phone in her hand feeling heavier than it should. She dialed David's number, her heart pounding as it rang. When he answered, his voice was warm, familiar, like he'd been expecting her. "Chloe, glad you called," he said. "Can you come by the office today? I'd like you to meet the team." She agreed, her voice steadier than she felt, and by noon, she was walking into a sleek office building downtown, her diner uniform swapped for a simple blouse and jeans. David greeted her himself, his handshake firm, his smile genuine. "Let's see what you can do," he said, leading her to a conference room where a small team waited, folders and laptops spread out like a battlefield. The meeting was a blur. David introduced her as a potential consultant, and before she could process it, they were handing her a document in Mandarin, asking her to translate on the spot. Chloe's nerves steadied as she read, her voice clear and confident as she rendered the text into English, then answered follow-up questions in Spanish when a team member switched languages to test her. The room went quiet, the team exchanging looks. David leaned back, his smile wider now. "Told you," he said to his colleagues. By the end of the hour, they offered her a job. Translator, liaison, whatever she wanted to call it. The pay was more than she'd made in a year at the diner. She accepted, her hands shaking as she signed the contract, her mind flashing to Mia, to the life she could build now. Weeks later, Chloe was back at the diner, not as a waitress but as a customer, picking up a to-go order for Mia. She'd quit the day after David's offer, her apron left folded on the counter like a shed skin. The diner felt smaller now, the clatter of plates distant. Lisa spotted her and grinned, rushing over for a hug. "Look at you, all fancy now," Lisa teased, eyeing Chloe's new blazer. Chloe laughed, but her eyes caught movement at table 7. Michael and Sophia were there again, their voices carrying as always. "This place is going downhill," Sophia was saying, her tone sharp. "The new girl's even worse than the last one." Michael nodded, distracted, his eyes on his phone. Chloe could have walked away, but something stopped her. She approached their table, her steps steady, her voice calm but firm. "Excuse me," she said, and Sophia looked up, her expression shifting from annoyance to confusion. "Do I know you?" Sophia asked, her brow furrowing. Chloe smiled, not the tight smile of a waitress, but something real, confident. "I used to work here," she said. "And I just wanted to say, your latte's spelled L-A-T-T. But I bet you knew that." She paused, then added, "By the way, I speak 5 languages. If you ever need a translator, let me know." She slid a business card across the table, her own now, with Carter Global Solutions printed in bold. Sophia's mouth opened, but no words came. Michael looked up from his phone, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. Chloe didn't wait for a response. She turned, her to-go bag in hand, and walked out, the bell above the door chiming behind her. Outside, the air felt lighter, the world bigger. She thought of Mia, waiting at home with her crayons, and of the new life they were building, one word at a time. Back in the diner, Sophia stared at the card, her fingers frozen on it. "Who was that?" she muttered, but Michael didn't answer, his eyes on the door where Chloe had disappeared. Across the room, Lisa watched, a grin spreading across her face. She'd seen it all, the mockery, the struggle, and now this. Chloe wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was proof that kindness and grit could outlast cruelty, that talent could shine through even the ugliest of words. And as Chloe drove home, the business card in her pocket felt like a promise kept, not just to herself, but to everyone who'd ever been underestimated. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little courage today, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel.